Be'ezus Hashem Yisborech, we continue, we're learning the holy letters of the Balatanya, letter number 13. The Shir is a schus for Shalema for Hinde Basta Beracho. We are learning this holy letter number 13, which we're going on a most fascinating journey deep into the core of creation, which is the purpose of life, to see in its entirety what is the purpose of the six-day creation. And we are spending some time going deep into both in the beginning of the Hagdama of this parak, and as we learn this parak to understand this posik, Ma Rav Tuvcha, Asher Tzefanta L'Reecha, that God has taken this vast kindness, this vast goodness, and He's hidden it away, He's put it away for those that fear Him. That one of the premises of what he's teaching in this letter is that there is a tremendous revelation in this world. This tremendous revelation, in order that it shouldn't be squandered, has to be hidden away. In order so it should be appreciated. In order that a person has an appreciation for anything significant. Therefore, there is an idea of hidden. You hide something. You cover it up. Because the thing that's most covered is most precious. And most precious is appreciated. This is one of the deep concepts of Vedic philosophy. To understand God's interaction with the world in a transcendental way, where God is He transcends the world, and then where He's immanent in creation, where He's actually in the creation. And we look at the creation of the world and we see that God created the world, and He's for sure above the world, beyond the world. And that is the reason why there's such a thing as heavens. Heavens covers the world, is a metaphor for God covers the world. And then there's the internal world, the way the world is, which is the earth. We live on the earth, which that is us being invested in the world. And then there's what the eye cannot see. You don't see someone's thoughts. You don't see their feelings. You don't see their inner emotions. And all of that is, ultimately speaking, to give place for and to give significance to the secrets, to the things that are hidden away. And in that space, person can realize that the secret of life, had the secret of life been put out in the open, one would never recognize it, because when something's in the open, when something is easygoing, something is available, it's not cherished. And this is tremendous paradox that there is in money. where Hashem created the world in a way that the world was a garden, but due to the Chet Tzadas, there was no more living in the garden in an easy way because of the tremendous lack of appreciation, because of Kofui Toiva, because you were given everything for free. And when you're given everything for free, there is no significance, there's no appreciation. And that is in the 6 days of creation, we see how insignificance was also created. First 10 years of a child's life, there's no appreciation, there's expectation. And we are explaining that the first day of a Sunday is the light. And the first 10 years of a person's life is Sunday is chesed. When you give chesed, there's usually no appreciation, both on the giver and on the receiver. The giver is giving from a place of superficiality. When a person gives something, they're giving from their right side, meaning they're giving from their heaven. They're not giving from deep within. The person who's giving, when you give food to someone, it's food that you cooked and created from outside yourself. And when you give that, the person is digesting it, ingesting it, consuming it internally. And there's a profoundly different thing from saying thank you when you digest and ingest food deep within yourself. When you're vulnerable, when you take whatever is being given to you and you take it and it makes an internal change. There's a tremendous shame that everybody experiences when they say profound thank you. There's an acknowledgement, a hoidah, an admission in that thank you. This is an extremely important thing to understand, the difference between an external recognition, an external knowledge. When we say the first blessing before we take food into our domain, into our rishus, when you say the first blessing, you are just blessing God for creating it, for making the mezonos, for creating everything with his mouth. Before you made that blessing, you had no connection to that food. You may have bought it, it may have came into your domain, but it's not ready to be digested by you. It's not ready for you to hold it, to take it. It doesn't belong to you. But when you acknowledge the creator of the world, when you acknowledge that the creator of the world has given you this, that is a profoundly different idea, because then you are bringing this into your domain. But still, that blessing is just a blessing of transference. You transferred it from the world to your domain, but it's still superficial. You are not blessing God for something internal. You are blessing God for something external. You are being moida. You are admitting that he created the world. You are admitting that he created the food that you have in front of you. But you have no real relationship with that food. The food hasn't affected you. But then after you consume the food and you make a bracha achroina boirin nefashos, rabbis v'chesroinon, when you talk about the ingestion and how this has fulfilled you and how you are satiated and satisfied, when you make the bracha birchas hamazon, the long bracha, that bracha is from a deep, vulnerable place. It plays from deep internal acknowledgement, an acknowledgement that's vulnerable, that you recognize with deep, profound humiliation, in the sense that you're humble, not humiliation that you're humiliated, but you feel tremendously vulnerable, because now that you're full, you know that you rest and you acknowledge and you recognize the Creator. You recognize that you are dependent on Him for your vivification, for the Devar Havaya, for the spark of godliness that's in that food, for the soul, the refreshing, invigorating energy that's trapped in the food. And you will set that all free. That energy is set free, and it gives you energy, temporary energy, to live another moment. It has given you energy, it has given you pleasure, it has given you tremendous satisfaction. That's an internal recognition. When you eat food and you digest it, you consume it, you chew it, after that, the blessing that comes that's profoundly different. And those blessings are much deeper, much more profound, much more intimate. They're much more imminent. They're not transcendent. When you make your first blessing, it's a transcendent blessing. It's a blessing that you're taking from one domain to another domain, but it's superficial because the food hasn't touched you. And when you make the next blessing, it's an internal pneumistic. It's an inner blessing. It's a blessing from satiation. It's a blessing from true transference. You have now transferred it from the general domain of your own four amas, of your own domain, and you've brought it deep within you, into your core, called atzmoisa. You brought it into yourself. And with that energy, you bless God. That is an entirely different blessing. That's a pneumistic blessing. That's suffering. That's deep within you. Now, to understand this, you begin to understand the difference between giving and receiving. That someone who's giving is always similar to the person who's making the first blessing. The first blessing is a blessing of transference. The second blessing is a blessing of satiation, of vulnerability, of inner acknowledgement, not outer acknowledgement. The first blessing is a masculine blessing. It's a male blessing. It's a chesed blessing. Chesed Hashem. You gave me chesed. You acknowledge the chesed. I have the mezoinus. The second blessing is a blessing of gevura. It's a blessing of strength. It's a blessing of power. It's a blessing of internalization. It's a blessing that is deep from within. It's from satisfaction, from satiation. But it's also a blessing that from a space of humility. It's a blessing that comes from deep within, where you recognize, as your life depends on it, that you are dependent on God. You recognize from deep within, because you ingested the food, because you are dependent on the food, because the food has touched you, has went deep within you. The food is gvuradik. It became internal, ingested, because it's now hidden inside you. It's extrapolated, not just hidden in your body, but your body starts the digestion process, the extraction process of all of that energy and all of that soulful energy that is trapped in the fibers, all of that vivification, that life force. That, with that acknowledgement, with that energy, with that satiation, you acknowledge God. That is a very different, humble, internal, deeper acknowledgement. And that is the difference between giving somebody food, which that's chesed, and receiving food, ingesting food, consuming food, which that is gvura, that is deeply internal. You use your teeth to break it down. And the whole process of digestion is a process of gvura. It's not a process of chesed. To give someone food, to take even food externally, is all connected to chesed. So in the blessings alone, there's a blessing of chesed, where we bless God for the chesed. And then there's a blessing of gvura. There's a blessing that's deeply internal. It's deep from within. And this is a tremendous understanding of life. To understand the difference between external and internal. Every single person, what Oli Balatanya is trying to teach in this letter is every person lives on these two planes. The superficial masculine plane, the superficial male plane, which is the plane of giving. But whenever you give, if you're in that state, whether you're a man or a woman, if you're giving, you're not giving from a place of internalization. You're giving from an external place, even if you cook the meal, even if you spend 2 hours making the most scrumptious meal. There's a profound difference between the person you're going to give it to, who's going to ingest it, who's going to consume it, who's dependent on it, than to your giving. When you give it from your right side, you give it from your superficial side, you give it from a space that's outside of you. Even if you worked through it, even if you invested all your energy in it, you're still giving it from a place of chesed. You're giving it from a place of superficial, of light, of daytime. You're giving it from a place that's in your four amas, in your space. And therefore the person taking it, when they say thank you, you might not be aware, but that thank you is coming from a deep, much deeper place. And especially when that thank you is from a place of hunger or a place of satiation, then the thank you is with tremendous humility. Sometimes it's with humiliation, but it's definitely always with a tremendous vulnerability, because I was dependent on you, because my internal organs, my emptiness was dependent on you filling me up. But when you filled me up, when you gave me that food, you didn't sense my emptiness. You didn't feel the vulnerability that I have. You didn't feel that. So you'll right away respond, oh, make no mention of it. It's nothing. But that's not because you truly, naturally, you don't truly recognize the vulnerability. Even a minute earlier, you may have thanked someone else with a deep, profound humility, with a deep, profound humiliation, with a vulnerability. You may have thanked somebody because a thank you, a deep thank you, comes from deep within. And when it's deep within, it's from a place of tzafon. It's a place of hidden. And when you take something that's hidden and you reveal it, when you go deep within, that is a private place. That is a vulnerable place. It's a place that's usually not covered. It's a place that's usually covered. It's a place that's usually not shared. And when we have to share that, when we have to share our dependency, our internal dependency on someone else, there's a tremendous shame that comes with that. And that's why a thank you is always more truthful, always more internal, always more vulnerable. And it is this tremendous hierarchy in life that one must realize, that to be in a space of giving and to be in a space of receiving where the worlds don't meet each other is the root of Golus. But the whole secret of the Torah is that the giving and the receiving must meet each other. Meaning to say, the giver has a tremendous obligation to feel the receiver and eliminate their shame and convey to the receiver that they are also in a humble space, that they are no different. They are also giving from a place of vulnerability. And when they say, don't make a mention of it, that is not just to brush off the thank you. That is not just because I'm giving from a space where I don't need a thank you. It's because that the depth of that meaning, when I say don't make a mention of it, no problem, not a problem. When we say all of these things, when we respond to a thank you, why do we feel slightly uncomfortable when we get a thank you? We feel slightly uncomfortable because we have subconsciously, psychologically, we have uncovered someone's shame. We have been megala, we have revealed their dependency. this is one of the deep psychological truths that many people don't want to discover, which is, if rich man wants to know he has been the one who's giving to the poor man, and a poor man wants to know that he's receiving and he's acknowledging and he's thanking. But in reality, Hasidic philosophy demands us to go deeper. Does the poor man really want to thank you? The poor man wants to thank God. Does not want to thank you. He says, "Loyal yidei manas basar v'dam, v'loyal yidei alvosam ki miyotcham le." I only want from you, God, because from you I have no problem. Blessing, the first blessing when I bring it into my domain, even that's chesed. I don't really know yet. I'm internalizing your chesed, but then I'm going to internalize it gvuradik. I'm going to bring it deep within me, and I will be vulnerable. But I don't mind, because that is my connection with you. Then I'm dependent on you. Then I live from you. But if I have to thank another human, subconsciously, why am I dependent on someone else? And there's that shame. If the Rambam says in Tzedakah there are 8 levels, that the Gemara says that when you give charity, of course, you vivify the person. It's wonderful, you get 6 blessings. But mefaisoy, when you appease him, when you understand him, when you identify with him, when you comfort him, when you make him know that you're both in the same boat, then you have eliminated his shame and you are both dependent on God. And you've also transferred back the energy, God's compassion that's trapped in the food, trapped in the money. You have transferred it back to God, which is the secret of the Chet Tzedas, which is the secret of Tzofan L'Reyecha. I put it away for you. What did I put away? Why is there energy at all in food? Why is there energy at all in money? Did you ever realize this truth? That a multimillionaire, when he has $10 million in his bank, what does he really have? When he has the gold coins or the dollar bills or zeros in his bank, what does he really own? Why is he walking around so arrogant? Does he even know what's so special? Why did he change overnight the minute he became a lottery winner? Why did he become so arrogant, or she? Why do they feel that they own the world in sense of entitlement? What is the spiritual significance? What is the internal? What is the truth behind this? And the answer is that God gave them the gift to control so much life. Do you understand? Money means energy, and energy, it means life. You understand that every single dollar that you own, even if it's not backed by the gold standard, what is that dollar? That's backed by $2 trillion of tax that's given back to the government, which means that every person, 10, 20, 30% of all of his work is going to go back to the government, meaning to say that the currency is a testament to 30% of the life force of a nation. You understand? 20% of the whole entire country's energy is its currency. So when you hold $100 bill, you hold $100 worth of life. Somebody is willing to put certain amount of energy. Why would God trap all of that energy? This is the beginning of the Chet Tzedas. All of that energy, because really in the beginning it was compassion from God. There was a Chesed Hashem. He wanted us to live in a garden, but we didn't appreciate that. There was no appreciation. Because you have to be vulnerable, you have to be dependent, you have to be missing, you have to suffer in order to appreciate. Because you have to have a void in order to appreciate. Whole idea of Tisha B'Av. To lose in order to gain, to lose to know, to appreciate means to have a lack of. The paradox of life. Ear only matters when you're not getting any. You only feel your organs when there's something wrong. You only appreciate what you have when you're about to lose it. It's the paradox of life. The paradox of the 7 spheres, of the 10 spheres, is a game. It is a dance between appreciation and lack of appreciation, between holding, living, knowing, seeing, hearing, and not having any of those experiences. And it's this idea that all of money really holds life. And the reason why that life is trapped in the food, trapped in the money, is because that life was a rachamim of Hashem. It was God's compassion. When you say it every morning, you say Moida Ani, but are you really Moida? You admit like you lose an argument to someone who's smarter than you. You don't really admit you haven't really fundamentally changed. Externally, you've changed. But the whole idea of money, the whole idea of this trap, the whole idea of everything trapped is so we should internally, fundamentally, realistically change. That means from an internal place. So we have to set all that money free in a space of compassion, which means that that money is controlling all of those billions of dollars are controlling a life force, a life, a year, a half a year. What is that year? Ultimately speaking, that is supposed to go back to Hashem. It's supposed to be a recognition that when we say Bechemla Rabba Munasecha, Bechemla, when we say it's your compassion, you gave me back life. The whole idea is to work, to get confused by the hard work, which means the hard work is to appreciate life. All of that hard work, what do we need this tax for? What do we need this logo, the LinkedIn page? The whole idea of it all is this idol, this tremendous illusion of my talent. All of that is so I should cherish, so I should cherish this time. Time means money. Money means life. Money means time. Time is life. But it's all a game of extraction. And why? Because if we had this life unlimited, we'd never appreciate it. And even if we appreciate it, we wouldn't recognize that life, what do we call that life? That life is Yudke Vovke. That is Rachamim of Hashem. That is God's compassion. So ultimately, rich man and poor man are not playing a game of give and take. The whole idea is loyal yidei manas basav the loyal yidei basam kiyim yotcham leapsucha. Both the poor and the rich both must share within this meal of giving and taking, which is we both receiving from God. And in that space, they have redeemed the money. They have made pada b'shalom nafshi. They have made tziyum b'mishpati pada v'shaveh b'tzedakah. They have redeemed the money. Everything in life is about redemption. All of the galus and geula, whole Tisha B'Av, the whole Chamishas B'Av, all of it is to fanta l'recha. We have redeemed the energy that's in the money by bringing back the compassion of God, by bringing back the true knowledge. So as long as we're still in a state of giving and receiving, we're giving from a superficial space, the person receiving is vulnerable. We have done wonderful things. But the true mefaisoi, the ultimate level of tziyam b'mishpati b'adar v'shaveh b'tzedakah, the ultimate level, berachamim galisi, that God is going to redeem His nation through compassion, says the Holy Zohar and the Chassidic masters, is when all the nation gets to a space where all of our wealth that we have is so God wants to feed His nation. He wants to feed His nation. How could He feed His nation? He started to feed His nation when He had two people, Adam and Chava, and they didn't acknowledge, they didn't recognize, they didn't appreciate. Because you cannot appreciate something that you're given. That's the law of life. You only can appreciate something you work for. And even then, you don't fully appreciate. And it's tremendous amount of pain, tremendous amount of gvura, humiliation, and emptiness and vulnerability. But ultimately, it's to recognize God from a vulnerable place, from a place from deep within. And to be in that space where it's internal, not only eternal, but it's internal, deep from within. A nation will completely scream out, demand. And that is what he wants to see in this letter. When you have the vast acknowledgement of chesed and gvura, chesed means transcendent, superficial. Gvura means internal, feminine, deeply vulnerable. When you come to acknowledge God's compassion, both on a superficial level, which is the chesed of it, and both on a gvura level, which is the deeply internal, then you have given birth to compassion. So he says, if you are more introvert, if you're more an internal type of person, and you don't realize the whole purpose is for you to give with tremendous humility, because you know what it means to be humble. You're humbled by God's overwhelming light. You know what it means. You know why you're deeply internal, why you're deeply feminine, why you're deeply introvert, is because you are holding on to something so precious that you get vivified by this preciousness, and you don't need the superficial life. So you have to share that with another person. You can't be selfish. You've gotten that from God, and you have to give it. And that is the secret of the whole Torah mitzvahs, and that is the secret of Usher in the Messianic era. When we set free all this energy, how do we set it free? By both rich and poor, giving it back to God, understanding the secret of money, Money is a trap. And what's trapped inside the money is the energy and the compassion of God. And you can only set everything free of its trap. You can only free it out of its maze. You could only be poided. You could only redeem it by first knowing. You only can redeem a captive. You could only redeem an energy if you understand its source, if you understand what its cost is. What's the value of it? What's the value of the captive? The captive energy is God's compassion. And when we become in a space of deep internal compassion, internal which means that both the rich man and the poor man have the same vulnerability in front of God. When they restore the vulnerability, why are we vulnerable? To each other. Because we understand that it's God's compassion, that He's given us life, He's given us everything that we don't deserve. And to understand that internally, not just to admit it, is the whole purpose of this game, that we play. And to be confused your whole life about this is to waste everything. But the whole secret, what the Balatanya wants to share with it, is to go deep within and to discover why is it that we have a left side and a right side. A left side is an internal side. It's because we have to get compassion of God from an internal place. And when we get to that, then we want to share that with everybody. And it's ultimately that recognition that will usher in the Messianic era.